Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you like this podcast, you will love my new anthology called Moms Don't Have Time to Have Kids. Check it out, and you'll hear from 49 authors about all sorts of things moms don't have time to do. All the authors have been on this podcast. Also, check out my TikTok, with Zibby and Tracy, my other podcast, Sex Talk with Zibby and Tracy. Check out Moms Don't Have Time to Write on Medium. And of course, my new publishing company called Zibby Books. And now back to our daily author interview site and a quick hello from some of my kids. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Enjoy the show. Lisa Harding is the author of Bright Burning Things, a novel. Lisa is a writer, actress, and playwright. She received an MPhil in creative writing from Trinity College, Dublin in 2014. Her short stories have been published in the Dublin Review, the Bath Short Story Anthology, Head Stuff, and Winter Papers. Harvesting, her first novel, won the 2018 Kate O'Brien Award and was shortlisted for an Irish Book Award and the Kerry Group Irish Novel of the Year Award. She lives in Dublin. All right. Welcome, Lisa. Thanks so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss Bright Burning Things, a novel.
It's a pleasure to be here, and it's lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too. Could you please tell listeners what this novel is about?
Yeah, so this novel is about bad mom. No,
Yes.
she is an actress who is no longer acting. So that kind of, that creative impulse is taken away from her. I think I heard you say something wonderful earlier, actually, about an injured athlete. And I thought,
yes,
that's kind of like what Sonia's like. Basically, she's a very isolated woman with no supports, whose acting career has come to a full stop, who's on her own, has a little boy and a rescue dog. And she's really struggling with profound isolation, with trauma from her past, which hasn't been dealt with, and with sitting with herself. And then she turns to alcohol to try to soothe herself and then recreate those highs that she, really misses from her acting career. But at the time we meet her in the novel, she's a full-blown alcoholic, and she really is quite dangerous. There's a lot of mania, and so the little boy, he's turning 5, and there's a huge amount of love in there, but he is at risk. And the dog, she can't even care for the dog. I mean, she leaves the two of them together. But I think the thing about Sonia is she is full of love, and that's why I could stay with her, when I was writing her.
Well, her intentions always seemed so positive, right? Mm. Like the moment where, like in your opening scene where she goes swimming and leaves her son on the beach with the dog, and this sort of concerned older woman comes over and is wondering why she's swimming in her underwear and why she's left her kid on the beach and the dog and everything. And yet she gets so fiercely protective. And as the reader, we're sort of alongside her being like, hey, get away from that kid. Like, who is this old lady? And then you slowly give us signs of what's really going on, and how she's fantasizing about the bottle, the cold bottle waiting for her, and the smoke in the kitchen. I mean, it's like, you clearly get a sense that even though she is so positive and possessive, right, about her loved one, and how she's trying not to get him to cry in the back seat, like all the mother things, right? You see quickly how perilous a situation it is.
Perilous is a good word, yeah. And as you say, it's in spite of her better instincts. I know a lot about, addiction and people in the grip of addiction, and how I love that expression, the imp of the perverse. I don't know if you've heard of it, but Edgar Allan Poe, I don't know if he coined it, but he certainly spoke about it, but where people's impulses, it's like a dark little imp kind of propelling you towards the destructive forces, whereas there is this other instinct that's constantly battling in her, particularly when she has clarity. So she's either deeply hungover, which makes her very cranky and her reality is distorted at the moment, or she's drunk right at this point in the narrative. And it's a very distorted lens that she sees the world through. But in her eyes, as with, any addiction or mental disorder, it all makes perfect sense in there. So it's kind of, I was really interested in writing that, how the world rubs up against her. And as you say, like, she's constantly in conflict with herself and with the world outside her. But she doesn't have any support. Like, nobody is looking out for her.
No, it's very sad,
Very sad, yeah. And I think, a few of my friends read the novel during COVID, and they were like, wow, they're performers. A lot of my friends are performers. And that part, once it's cut away, it's like what you were saying about the athlete as well. Or if you're used to living at such a level of intensity and that's taken away from you, you do feel bereft and you do feel slightly mad. You know, I was an actress for about 20 years and my own career stopped. And I mean, there were, you know, there was a variety of factors there, but I remember facing the void thinking, I'm mad. You know, I have this, like, what am I going to do with this energy that used to go into performing? Yeah. Like Ruby Wax writes about it brilliantly. I don't know if you've read any of her work about the getting addicted to the charge of attention and performing. And so my Sonia character is very much an addictive personality, and it latches on to different things at different points in her life.
There's another book too. It's sort of a different genre, but it's called Palm Beach by Mary Atkins. And in it centers on a man who used to be an actor and a working actor for many years and even was nominated for something. And then he has a throat, like a polyp type removed, and he gets his nerves damaged, or I'm not saying the science right, but anyway, all to say he couldn't be an actor anymore and went on to be a house manager in Palm Beach, which is what the story is about. But it's brilliant. It's about like how you go from doing something like that and something he was so good at and loved and was rewarded, and then shifting. And of course, this book sort of makes fun of the scene in Palm Beach of the uber wealthy, blah, blah, blah. But it's that same sort of post acting. And it's the same for athletes, you know, as I know I keep saying this, but yeah, athletes too. I mean, after this intensity, what next? What do you do? Where do you go?
Very difficult. And we know, you know, a lot of people have become very profoundly depressed. And, you know, I think Sonia is actually in a state of depression, although her actions are quite manic. And, you know, she seems quite, because she does there is, you know, when alcoholism gets to that stage where she's drinking possibly 3 bottles of wine a night at this stage, really, it does bring on a kind of a mania. And I think there's something very magical about Sonia because of the actress in her. I don't know if you remember, but there are scenes where she kind of play acts Shakespeare with her little boy, and she teaches him like the lines, you know, and he's Romeo and the little dog is dressed up, and it's like it's completely bonkers in her world. But yeah, there's a lot of peril, and it's awful to know that a child is at risk despite the mother's better instinct, you know.
Yes.
It's a horrible thing to witness.
Sometimes I get like overwhelmed doing this podcast because I feel like every book has a story about some poor child that has been traumatized or mistreated, or something happens, and I'm like, are any kids out there okay? Like maybe just not the ones in books.
In literature, maybe that's
literature,
it,
you know,
yeah. There's a kind of a high stakes, isn't there, if you're writing about something like alcoholism anyway.
Yes. But your writing style itself is so beautiful. I mean, I know you won a prize for your first novel and everything like that, but it is so literary and beautiful and almost poetic the way you write about the most mundane thing. I mean, a scene with like a boy in the backseat of a car, like I would say, like the way I would write it, like, you know, like the versus the way you wrote it, it's unbelievable. I don't know. I'm trying to find when they were in the car. As the car heats, fog forms on the windows. I draw a heart on the windscreen, keeping one hand on the steering wheel, and write, "Mommy loves you," inside it. "Tommy, look." I trace the letters with my fingertip, reading aloud. He opens his eyes, squinting, leans into Herbie, tries to hug him, arms only reaching a third of the way around his wide girth. The dog moans, a happy, contented sound. "Good boy, Herbie, best boy." His thick tail thumps on the tatty nylon seats. "My best boys, what would I do without you?" And then you go on from there. It's just like so beautiful. And then you say, you think somebody's following her. The character thinks somebody is following him. And you say, "I turn to the right, checking the mirror and see him still. But then no, it's not him. He was just having his fun. Harmless fun. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay." My heartbeat slows down as I think of the promise waiting for me in the fridge. I'm glad I had the foresight to do that. Chill it. It's hot in the car now, and it's still warm outside.
Oh, thanks, Zibby. It's good. Just lovely to hear it read out like that.
Oh, it's so good. It's just like such great writing. No words are wasted. Like I love this style.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's not for everyone, that style, because it's quite staccato. And it did, like I did climb right inside her and wrote her from the inside out. And as you've just read, it's the first person. So it's the first person present tense. And yeah, it meant that I was living with this woman for 3 years. And, there were aspects of writing her, there were aspects of people I love and aspects of myself that I was like, oh, that it was quite difficult to write. But thank you for saying that about the prose, because I think I do love lean prose. Like I love prose that doesn't use it, if you can get there quicker, get there. That's how I feel. I mean, I'm quite an impatient, jittery reader, and I don't go in for like long pages of description or writers that are kind of, pirouetting on the page. I do love that lean, mean machine style, but there's a little bit of poetry in there too, because I love language, and I think she is very magical in her thinking. So thank you for saying that.
I love that. Pirouetting on the page. That's really
You know
cool.
what I mean?
I do. I know exactly what you mean. I'm like, yes, I do. Sometimes that's really beautiful too. I mean, it depends, what the goal is.
If exactly. I mean, if it merits it. I often think like the form, the form and the content need to kind of marry up for me. So sometimes you can feel when a writer is really reaching, and sometimes, as you say, it's completely intrinsic to the way a writer writes. But I personally love, getting to the bones of it, and I love editing. I think editing is a huge part of writing.
Anytime I write an essay or whatever, because my go-to form is essay writing. Anytime I finish, I'm like, okay, now I have to go back and cut 100 words at least, because it always gets better with fewer words. I don't know why. It's what you're saying. Like you take out the stuff that you don't need, and then it just makes it better.
Yeah. I mean, it suits how I write. But, like I was reading Madame Bovary again recently, she's wonderful. Flaubert, but my God, he goes on. And the adjectives and the adverbs. I know that was the style as well. But it's interesting, isn't it? And it does kind of lull you into that when you get into that world where it's really lush. The writing is really lush, and you can kind of get in there. But I think the modern sensibility suits better that approach, or particularly in a first person as well. It would be completely unnatural for me to start writing long, kind of, overworked descriptions, because it's through her eyes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I had to stay true to her and what she sees and notices.
It almost reminds me, have you read, it's a memoir in recipes. It's called a memoir anyway, it's by Phyllis Grant. It's called Everything is Under Control. It came out right as the pandemic was starting. And she has a similar style in the sort of the way she parses words, and how she can tell a whole story about I don't know, something terrible happening or whatever, and just a few images and I don't know, I think you'd probably like it.
It sounds wonderful. Yeah, I haven't read it. Thanks.
Everything is Under Control.
Check it out.
It's not long, but it's a memoir. It's not a novel, but still. Anyway.
Sounds great.
I should ask, maybe I should have said, what do you like to read? I shouldn't, aside from Flaubert and,
No.
From Flaubert to, Phyllis Grant in San Francisco.
What do I like to read?
Yeah, what do you like to read?
I mean, I adore Elizabeth Strout. Maybe who doesn't? But I really admire her. I think Olive Kitteridge was one of the best creations. I love that she was so spiky and so unlikable in so many ways. And again, a character that's kind of, not able to take charge of her own tongue, and so cruel to her son and husband at times, and yet so capable of such extreme love and warmth to people outside. So, the what do they call it? The house devil, street angel thing. But I think Elizabeth Strout has a beautiful style, and she writes with such heart, but it's also quite funny and caustic.
Yeah.
I really love her. I love, I read, I mean, it's part of what I do is reading, which is really wonderful. And, I read very widely. I love that Australian author, Tim Winton. Don't know if you've come across him.
I haven't.
Yeah, he's kind of remarkable. I've read all of his works, and I came across him because I saw a play of his at the National Theatre in London years ago. It was an adaptation of one of his novels called Cloud Street. And he creates these extraordinary worlds, I mean, in Western Australia. And he writes very differently to me in that, he writes a lot about landscape and the place being a central character in his novels. But he's funny again. I really, the older I get as well, the more I really appreciate I do go to the dark places in my writing, but I do appreciate the ability to offset it against humor. I love that. But I was just finished reading before I went back to Flaubert, The Lonely Passion of Judith Hearne. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it was Brian Moore. Very grim, very beautiful. 1950s Ireland, this aging spinster, and just this kind of aching portrait and loneliness, you know. And I love books in translation. I read a lot of French authors. There's this incredible novel called Beside the Sea, and I'm trying to remember her name. Veronique Olmy, Olmi, and she's a playwright too. But she wrote this extraordinary novel, it was quite a while ago, about a mother with very serious depression, who's again is very isolated. And I'm not giving anything away, but she actually ends up, because it's on the back of the book, smothering her children.
Oh boy.
Thinking she's protecting them from this awful life. But it's so sparsely written and so tender, if you can imagine.
Wow. That sounds really good.
It's very powerful.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. As if I needed my reading list to grow, but thank you for that. So when you're not reading and writing, what do you do? Like, what's your life like?
Well, it's been pretty limited in the last couple of years, or restricted. Ireland has had a tough time with COVID. We've had quite, extreme lockdowns here. So I am not a mother. And I live with my rescue dog. And so a lot of the things that I love to do, like my dance class and, teaching creative writing and being with friends, going to the cinema, going to the theatre, that was so much a part of my life. It was a good balance with the writing stopped. So I feel like I'm just kind of emerging back into life. And I feel a little bit like, like I hit the madness of Sonia. Thankfully, I don't have an addiction to substance, thank God. But that, that thing where you're on your own too much and your thoughts just go round and round, it's very hard to interrupt them, even if you're conscious. But what I love to do is I love to hike in the mountains. We weren't even allowed to go beyond 2 kilometers here. So I couldn't even go up the mountains for hiking, which I would do every weekend. I've got back into it. And I love my rescue dog, and Herbie is such a big character in the book, and I think he's one of my favorite characters. I can see your beautiful dog there.
Yes.
Yeah, and I love, there's so many things. I love dance, and I love going to theatre and reading and hanging out with friends. So it's just like life is beginning to come back to normal, but then we're getting all this dreadful, I don't know, media stuff at the moment. So I think genuinely, people that lived alone during the pandemic, because, quite a few of my friends are single. I mean, it seems to be, I don't know, it's a great proportion of society. I don't know what it says about society now, but are living alone, right? And I think that's had a great toll on people's mental health. I don't think we fully understand, but the impact of kind of being locked down on your own in a space and everything going online was very, very peculiar.
Yes. I agree. I think that many of the effects of people who are alone, the effects on children, the effects on, I know that mental health in children, I was just at this event by the Child Mind Institute, they don't even know the full, they were calling them COVID kids. What does that mean? What does it mean when you grow up and you can't see people's faces? But you're right, isolation. And I felt like I was going out of my mind all the time, but anyway.
And I think I remember some of my friends, are in partnerships and they have kids, and some of them, not all of them, but some of them said it was beautiful time because they got to spend time with their partner and their kids in a way they hadn't because it's such busy lives. And that really can make people feel quite bereft that don't have that.
Interesting.
Do you know what I mean? Because it threw you back on this kind of supposed idea. They'd use the word bubble but family. And if people's family relations are very stressed or they don't have that, I think that there was just people really kind of looking at their life choices and thinking, what is this?
Yeah.
But also the alcoholism thing that I've written about in the book, or people turning to alcohol, that's really been on the rise. And also, we know abuse within relationships where that was already there. There was times where I would actually get overwhelmed, really overwhelmed, when I think of kids that were in families where all this was going on. And And I know, you know, it does. And I have a friend who works for Women's Aid. It's here in Ireland. And she was saying like the amount of phone calls from women in these situations and children just not even getting out to school. So not getting their usual outlets, you know, and where everybody's kind of stuck in a pressure cooker. So yeah, in a weird way, that character that I wrote, who's so profoundly isolated, it kind of, a lot of people ended up living that life, you know?
Wow. Makes me very sad.
Yeah, I know.
Scary.
I hope people are okay. I mean, I think there's a kind of a PTSD out there, don't you? Like, I think people are. I got on an airplane for the first time. I don't know if you've traveled.
Oh my gosh. The first time I went on an airplane, I was having a panic attack. Literally. I had a panic attack going to a football game. I was like, I can't do this. I can't it's been really hard. Yeah. It was hard getting back. I feel like I've crossed over something as there are more and more events, like I'm getting used to it. But yeah, I spoke to some woman. She's like, you have like undiagnosed PTSD right now. Like that is why everything is loud and everything is hard and you're scared to go to a restaurant and all this stuff, because it took me a very
emotions are very raw. Yes. So yeah, and the way Sonia in the book lives her life, it's kind of like everything is hyper saturated, and yeah, she feels everything way too intensely. And
yes, no, I get it.
Really,
I think so many people will get it. Oh my gosh, well, it was so beautiful. Are you working on anything now?
I am. Actually, my first book has been optioned for a film, and we've just handed in a screenplay with there's this, it's called the British Film Industry, BFI.
Yes.
This side of the world, and that's in development. And then this Bright Burning Things has just been optioned, and I was talking to a wonderful Irish director, and we're discussing about turning it into a series, actually. Ooh. So yeah, I will be involved in that. I won't be the only writer, and I'm writing novel number 3. Which is actually funnier. It's dark because it's kind of my bent, but it is funnier. And all I know so far, because I'm in the process of writing it, I never know what I'm writing really, but it's about a group of first-year college students who come from very dysfunctional homes and kind of find themselves and form this alternative family, and then they kind of turn on each other. So it is pretty dark. It's almost cult-like what they create.
Ooh, also sounds really good.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's funnier, you know. I am enjoying writing. It probably has a little bit more of a thriller edge. Yeah, and I'm allowing myself go there.
Well, I hope you're allowed to get out of your house more.
I know. Well, it's beginning to open up. But then in Ireland, like in Dublin, they're very, very frightened here because of our healthcare system. It can get overwhelmed very easily. And they're talking about all these kind of bringing in more restrictions. So
no.
And we're coming into the winter here, and our last winter, oh God, we were locked down fully for 3 months, 2 kilometers. And I think everybody's just in fear that's going to happen again, really.
Oh. I'm sorry. I'll be.
No, we'll be okay, won't we? I mean, look, we're all, I don't know what the percentage in America is, but a lot of us are vaccinated.
I could just keep you here in like a Zoom in the corner of my screen. We could just hang out,
No, Zoom doesn't do it for me, though.
I know.
It's like this weird alternate reality, isn't it?
Yes, I agree. I'm ready for 3D. Maybe Zoom has to move to 3D or something. Maybe someone's working on that. Anyway, last question. What is your advice to aspiring authors?
Yeah, no, aspiring authors, as in an author who hasn't written anything yet. I think it's really good to find a creative writing class. I think that's a great idea, and to give you impetus and support in the beginning. And then what I did was I moved from, I did go back and do an MPhil, but you don't have to at all. Just do a course. There's so many amazing courses online at the moment as well. And then it's lovely to be part of a writing group. And, and I'm part of a very supportive writing group at the moment. And they're wonderful. It's a wonderful bunch of women. And yeah, to have people that you really respect their opinion, I think is important, and respect their writing. That's important to me anyway, because I don't want to take advice from someone, that I don't like.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it's good to seek out people who are on the same journey.
That's a great advice. Excellent. Well, Lisa, thank you. I'm so glad our paths crossed, and thank you for introducing me to your character and sort of taking me in. And, I just love the way you write. So
thank you, Zibby. No, it's been lovely to meet you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.